talking about Doctor Who and Torchwood once again.
I'm particularly interested because I feel like I've guessed what your take on this episode is going to be, and I might be completely wrong, but just in case, what did you think of this one?
That was fine. I actually liked this one a bit more, mainly because I like Tosh more. It was just kind of a depressing kind of episode because, he basically has to sentence himself to death. It's one of those kind of things.
Tosh can't catch a break.
Nah, she finds herself a good guy, and then he has to go back in time. And not only that, she has to kind of trick him into doing all this.
Even if he is both too young and too old for her simultaneously.
Which I thought was a bit silly. Like, he's a 24 grown adult.
I don't know. On the one hand, that's true. On the other hand, compared to the Torchwood team, Tommy projects really young.
I think they made a cute couple, though.
I also was glad to see this being a Tosh episode. My first reaction, legitimately, when Tosh was like the major focus of a scene, I was like, yay, Tosh episode. Surprised myself with how much I like her character, given how little of an impression she left on me when I first watched this show. But I like Tosh a lot. And yet this is a pretty good episode, but what I was expecting, honestly, either one or both of you to say was that this is sort of like debatably a less interesting version of Out of Time.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, I would say they have more differences than they do similarities, but those similarities are pretty obvious.
Yeah, they're similar, but I never thought about that when I was watching it. I think it's because I was more interested in the romance between Tosh and the soldier guy.
Tommy, yeah. That episode, Out of Time, was about people who just kind of wound up in present day. They don't really have a way back, as far as they know, to where they came from, and so they kind of just have to deal with it here. Tommy is the complete opposite situation, where he, for the most part, seems perfectly fine living in the modern day, especially since he has Tosh and he's so infatuated with her. But he has to go back, and we know that as soon as he does, he's going to die basically weeks later. And so the dilemma becomes, is it fair to let this happen? No, but what's fairness when the universe is at stake?
Yeah, they don't really have a choice. It's one of those bad situations. So it's nothing they can do there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me is that, it's not the first time that we've done, in a show like this, the whole have a guy who's cryogenically frozen and we wake him up in modern day. But the nice spin on it is that we established that we wake him up, one day every year since he got frozen. And so it's not like he's waking up and he has to, get way used to completely different modern reality, like it's a complete black and white shift. He's watched the past several decades of history go by in what for him is just a really screwed up couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that concept really interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I like the idea of doing the, frozen caveman lawyer thing, except it's not like a hard shift for them. He has a routine where every day they wake him up, let him out on the town, do some tests, and he gets to sample the culture as it, not as slowly as in reality, but slowly kind of progresses. And what I think is really interesting is the scene where he's watching the TV and he's seeing, the reports about the Iraq War. This guy has seen, or at least heard, about every war from World War I to Iraq, stacked right on top of each other, like it's just a couple of weeks in between each of them. Yeah, it's really depressing. The perspective that gives him. Well, I was in the Great War, they called it, the war to end all wars. And now I'm just in this situation where every time I wake up, it's like we've got a new war. And I'm just so desensitized to it. It's like, well, you know what? I guess humanity maybe isn't worth it after all.
Yeah, you can't help but feel that way, especially after every time I wake up, there's a new war. Like, what the hell?
I maybe wish the episode had been a little bit more about that, where we pay a little bit of lip service to, do we think that people are worth saving in the end? And I don't know, I wish that had factored a little bit more into, his and Tasha's last couple of conversations. But in the moment, it really, what takes over what they talk about is just the personal element of it being his duty. He's the only one who can do it. And, what the consequences for him will be. That said, what I also like about this being kind of a similar premise to Out of Time is that we can call back to Owen, who has been in this exact same situation.
Yeah.
And for once, lets that be an opportunity for him to express some empathy
Yeah.
and some care. It's just my boy's all grown up. He's finally a somewhat fully realized human being who's able to relate to Tosh on him. It's great.
He had a good moment for once, but if I remember right, it won't last long. But you know.
He got a couple of moments. He got one at the end, and he got one toward the middle where he
Mhm.
sees Josh and Tommy are getting close. And the thing is, Owen, he could be a dick about it, but he chooses
Mhm.
to be really understanding and like, I just want you to be careful in case the time comes where you have to say goodbye. Been through that, and he would not want anyone else to have to experience that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice for once he actually showed some empathy for once for other people on the team instead of just let me just get this little dig in for no reason.
Like,
Yeah,
damn it, Owen, you're not supposed to be an onion.
I think it's really good. I think it maybe starts kind of slow. Like, I think the premise with Tommy is immediately kind of interesting, but something about the way it's paced kind of has me looking at my watch kind of for the first 10 minutes where I'm like, I know nobody owns watches anymore, but still, where are we going with this? But then once it picks up and like once we get to the end, when she's like, you're the one who has to do it because you're my brave, handsome hero, that should see, but it hits so well. Like that moment actually caught me in the feels.
Like I said, I think these two have good chemistry together, why it works.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it's not as strong as the first two episodes, just because I think those are really strong, and this one kind of meanders in a few places, but
Mhm.
for them, it's really good.
For me, this episode is kind of like a different beast compared to the first two episodes of series two, because the first two episodes were very action oriented, whereas this one it takes a step back and tells a more smaller scale story about an individual.
That might actually be where my difficulty with it stems from.
Mhm.
Expecting every episode of this series to just be like a complete action thing, but coming off of, you're right, the first two episodes were both very, very action heavy. The episode two in particular was like really tense and really had a lot of forward momentum. To go from both of those being at the forefront of my mind to this one that's very focused on the human drama stuff, it took me a minute to acclimate to that.
Yeah, just different tone and stuff. But this one worked better than me last episode. I did not like last week's episode, even though I did like talking about it. But that episode was just like a cheesy sci-fi channel thing, and we already went through like I don't like how Jack treats everybody. But this one I actually like Tosh, and I like seeing these two together. And it's just such a sad ending for the both of them. There's nothing they can do, even though the whole universe is at risk again. It's kind of a personal little story between the two of them, which I like.
I suppose that is maybe a potential complaint you could make, is
Mm,
doing the whole fragments of the past bleeding out into the present and it's going to destroy the whole universe. Is
mm,
doing that again this soon after Doomsday maybe a bit too
yeah.
repetitive?
It's a little much. The whole universe is going to, be destroyed, but it shouldn't be the whole universe. Maybe just, I don't know, just whales.
I mean, they try to position it like it'll at first be Cardiff and then it'll progress to the entire world.
Just like England or Wales or Cardiff or just, America. Just
Th-
one little area or, well, big chunk.
Then again, maybe no one will notice that Cardiff's gone. I mean, it's what the Slovenes said in the Doctor Who episode Boomtown.
Maybe.
Yeah, imagine it happens to just Wales and the rest of the world doesn't care.
Yeah.
Yes, and when we get to Miracle Day, there was a line that Rick said that said Wales is the New Jersey of Great Britain.
I mentioned Jack and like stakes as Doomsday. I don't think this is on purpose, but you could argue maybe they did that as like they handled this situation way way better than they handled the Doomsday situation. Jack didn't have to get shot again. Nobody made any threats on anybody's life. They generally handled it as a united front. And so you could say this is an intentional contrast. Look how far they've come because of Doomsday. Like, thank goodness that didn't have to happen again.
I don't think they were thinking on that lines. I think that's giving them too much credit.
What if there was a
I'm not
version of this
saying that's
episode where everything does go horribly wrong?
Probably another alternate universe, of course.
I don't want to argue that that was the intent of the writing, but you could read into it on that level.
Yeah.
I'm very much a fan of Death of the Author when it comes to reading into the themes of these shows, if you haven't noticed.
I can tell.
I like to read into what's on screen regardless of what the writers actually meant. But yeah, about Jack, you mentioned that he was a jerk for the last couple episodes, and he's surprisingly all right here. Her and Jack's friendship is something that I kind of keep surprising myself with how much I like that. Like, I think the two of them have a really solid dynamic together. And I don't know, I feel like that might be all I've got as far as notes on this episode. The both of you are actually, this discussion is making me appreciate it more. I think it's really, really solid.
Yeah, I think it's really solid too. It's sort of like Out of Time and Captain Jack Harkness, where it might be end of the world stakes, but it's personal about it. And because they did a good job fleshing out our guest character, it works. And
In
they
that
hint
case-
that maybe Owen and Tosh will get together at the end of the episode.
That poor woman.
That we're just laying groundwork right now, which is Owen showing basic human empathy.
Like, good job, Owen! Yay!
You acted like a human being for 5 minutes.
Owen gets the award for most improved.
For now.